sutta. And I want to move on into the next portion of the sutta, because I want to finish this today. Okay, now we come to the portion which is interesting and problematic. I don't know if you've read the note here. Because the text, the actual Pali text that's come down, see, I modified the translation based, let me put it this way. No, I'm sorry. This is quite normal and natural. This is to be expected. It's the next passage that I modified. Okay, so how is there agitation due to clinging? Let me write these words on the board. Okay, the word upada, this is a shortened form of the gerund or absolutive. You know what those words mean? Okay, it means it's the form of having done something. So upada is a shortened form of upadaya, which is having clung. There is paritasana. The word paritasana is an interesting word in that it can be based on two different Sanskrit words or Sanskrit roots. Either trish or tus. But you see, in Pali, we don't have these letters, the r and the sh of the Sanskrit. So in Pali, this root would also come out to be tus. The root trish means to crave. It's actually related to the English word thirst, to have a thirst for something. You could see thirst and trish. And from this word trish, from this root, we get in Pali the word tanha, which means craving. And it's hard to see in the Pali the relation between trish and tanha. We could see it more clearly in the Sanskrit. Trishna, you could see direct connection. But in Pali, there's another way of writing the same word, tanha, where you could see the connection, tasina. I think it's spelled like this. Okay, now the word tus, the other root, tus, gives a verb tussity, which means to fear, to be afraid. So the word paritasana in Pali somehow merges these two meanings of craving and fear. But in English, we don't have a convenient word that merges the meaning of both craving and fear. So I used agitation. I don't remember exactly the word that Nyanamoli used. I think he might have used anguish, which I thought was not satisfactory. Trepidation? Well, trepidation is related to fear, not so much to craving. Anyway, this is the sense, but here you'll see, as this passage develops, you'll see that it's relating paritasana more to fear than to craving. Oh, that's interesting. That's true. Yeah. Okay, so let's see how the passage develops. Okay, how is there agitation or paritasana due to clinging? Okay, so first the Buddha uses the stock formula for the ordinary or the worldly person, in Pali, the putujana, the common person, one who has no regard for the noble ones, is unskilled and undisciplined in their teaching, and so on. So this one he adopts any of the 20 types of personality view, identity view, the view of self in relation to the 5 aggregates. So he regards material form as self, self is possessed of material form is in the self, or self as in material form. So we have 4 possibilities here, positing a self in some way in relation to the body, material form. Either one takes the body to be the self, or one assumes that there is a self that owns the body, so the body is mine, or else on a more philosophical level, one posits that there is the self somewhere inside the body, or that there is an all-encompassing self, so that the body is within the self. In any case, one's identity, whatever view one adopts, one's identity, one's sense of personal identity, is bound up with material form, with the body. So what happens? The text says that material form of the worldly person, changes and becomes otherwise. This is generally referring to the aging process. With the change and becoming otherwise of that material form, his consciousness is preoccupied with the change of material form. My hair is turning gray. Oh, I look in the mirror. Those wrinkles weren't there before. Oh, what's going on? Now I'm getting weaker. Oh, in the past, I used to be able to run 3 miles. Now I'm getting tired even after the first mile. Richard, did you? Yeah.
I think in the context of the conclusion of the paragraph about agitation,
Yeah.
they also be thinking of things like panic attacks, psychosomatic symptoms.
Yeah.
2 days ago, I talked to a woman whose psychiatrist ordered medication for her because she thought panic attacks were so serious they could kill her.
Mm.
Right? And I
Yeah.
think it's referring also to that,
Yeah.
not just normal processes like aging,
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
have agitation.
Yeah.
If this attachment, makes you agitated,
Yeah.
that's real anxiety.
Yeah. Okay, but that's jumping the gun. I want to go through the intervening phrases. Okay, so first, let's see. We have the consciousness is preoccupied with the change of material form. Okay, so now, the body is changing, maybe not necessarily just aging, but when it's getting ill. Okay, I go to the doctor, he reports, okay, you have pre-diabetes, signs of pre-diabetes, or your blood pressure too high, or your, what is the other thing? Blood pressure is too high, cholesterol level is too high. It's not a laughing matter. And then, of course, what everybody fears most, okay, we've done this scanning or screening, and it looks like there's a little tumor there. We have to do a biopsy. So then the mind is really preoccupied with the change in form. Okay. So then, agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of material form arise together. It's a rather complex expression in the Pali. I won't go into it in detail here. But there's indicating like maybe a whole bundle of mental states can arise associated with that agitation. So this would include the panic attacks, so agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of form arise together and remain obsessing his mind. Because his mind is obsessed, he becomes anxious, distressed, and concerned. Well, as Richard said, it can go beyond just concern, but, really, anxiety. Let's see what the Pali words used here. Yeah, Uddesavibhanga. It's related to that verb tussati, to be afraid. So that's translated anxiety. Vigata is like distress, affliction of the mind. I think this is a Chinese kunao. And then upekava, that is, it's translated concern, a kind of attached, looking at the situation with attachment. Okay, and so in that way, upadhyaya paritasati, because of clinging, through clinging, one becomes agitated. Okay, then the same pattern is unfolded or unpacked in regard to the other four aggregates. Okay, now we come to paragraph 21. This is the one that is a bit perplexing because the original Pali text says, anupada paritasana, which would mean that through non-clinging there is agitation. But that is sort of exactly the opposite of what the Buddha repeatedly teaches. Through clinging there is agitation, craving, fear, distress. Then get rid of clinging, and then there's no agitation, anxiety, distress. But if we look at this text, what it's saying, anupada paritasana, through non-clinging there is agitation. So what to do about this? When I was working, I think Venerable Nyanamoli had originally translated following the Pali text, but I thought this is contradictory to the teaching. It must have been a transmission error. or a copyist error, because there's another sutta that occurs in the Samyutta Nikaya. I think it's chapter 22. It could be sutta number 7 and 8, which is exactly the same as this portion, and it has the expected reading. Through clinging, there is agitation. Through non-clinging, there is no agitation. The Samyutta Nikaya version has anupada naparitasana, with non-clinging, no agitation. But the Pali version has anupada paritasana. Through non-clinging, there is agitation. Wait, I had checked the commentary when working on this, and the commentary accepts the reading that's come down, and it gives a rather, what I call a convoluted explanation. It says, what is meant, I copied it here. So it says, how is there agitation through non-clinging? Then it gives the answer, through the absence of anything to cling to. For if there were anything, any conditioned thing which was permanent, stable, or the self, then it would be proper to cling to it. But because there is nothing that can be clung to, therefore, putting it short, therefore, because there is nothing that can be clung to, there is agitation. But that, I have to say, doesn't make sense to me. Then, just yesterday and today, I checked the Chinese version of this, and strangely, the Chinese version reads exactly like the Pali version. It has the same thing. It has Yun he Bixu ne shou Kong bu. Is that correct? Correct pronunciation? You understand? Makes sense? You're a Cantonese speaker. I want Bo Wei. Yun he Bixu ne shou Kong bu. Kong bu is fear. Excuse me? Yeah. What did I say? I said no. Oh, I'm putting in a Pali word there. No wonder. Busho. This is what happens to me sometimes when I meet a person from Sri Lanka and they start to speak to me in Sinhala. Then I start to try to reply to them in Sinhala, but suddenly I realize I'm throwing in Chinese. They're looking at me puzzled. I'm throwing in Chinese words. Okay, but anyway, the Chinese text is exactly the same. It says, how is there for a monk fear due to non-clinging? But I still think what happened is that in a very early period, there was either a reciter's error or a copyist error before the two schools went their separate way. The Pali school, and then I think the Chinese version is based on the Sarvastivada school. So before those two schools went their separate way, this, I would call it a textual error, has entered into the text. Because it makes much better sense to take it according to the usual meaning through non-clinging, there is no agitation. Through clinging, there's agitation. Through non-clinging, there is no agitation. Okay, let's see the explanation. This is paragraph 21. Okay, so here, the well-taught, noble disciple who has regard for the noble ones and so on, does not regard material form as self, or self is possessed of material form and so on. So you see, not regarding material form as self, and that supports my interpretation. Not regarding material form as self is non-clinging. Regarding material form, the five aggregates, as self is clinging. So not regarding form and the other aggregates as self is non-clinging. Okay, so then that material form of his changes and becomes otherwise. With the change and becoming otherwise of material form, his consciousness is not preoccupied with the change of material form. Again, this is what happens when one doesn't identify the body as self, so the body changes. It doesn't mean one has to be a noble person, a stream enterer, but even somebody who has this right view of the body gets sick, changes, grows old, and one doesn't become preoccupied with that. Looking in the mirror every day, are there more gray hairs, more wrinkles? I remember back, well, still I see that, but this used to occur to me many years ago sometimes. Maybe it occurred one time when I was riding on the subway. Like a woman came onto the train, sat opposite me, and she could have been 75 years old, but the hair was dyed like a bright red, and the face was painted over with so much makeup and lipstick, like she was trying to look like she's 25 or 30 years old. And I felt so sorry for her. And I think this was even before I encountered Buddhism. But it just stuck in my mind that how a person is so attached to their physical appearance that they try to disguise the fact of aging. Okay, so the consciousness is not preoccupied with the change of form. Then agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of form do not arise together and obsess his mind. And so with this, because the mind is not obsessed, he's not anxious, distressed, and concerned, no anxiety spells, no panic attacks, no fainting and deep distress because of the change, but one can accept the change with equanimity. Okay, so then Maha Kaccana goes through the same pattern with regard to the other four aggregates, and then he sort of comes to the conclusion, paragraph 22. So when the Buddha rose from his seat and went into his dwelling, after giving a summary without expounding the detailed meaning, then he repeats the summary statement. And then he says, I understand the detailed meaning of the summary to be thus. But now he's going to give the monks liberty to sort of double check on him. So he says, if you want, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this. And as the Blessed One explains it to you, so you should remember it. Okay, so the monks get up and they go to the Buddha, and then they repeat to the Buddha Maha Kaccana's explanation. Then the Buddha ends with a statement of praise of Maha Kaccana. Maha Kaccana, O monks, is wise. He has great wisdom. if you had asked me the meaning of this, if I hadn't gone to my dwelling and closed the door behind me, I would have explained it to you in the same way that Maha Kaccana has explained it. So that is the meaning, and so you should remember it. And that is the end of the sutta. Okay, if there are a few questions, we could take them now. If there are questions that need fuller discussion, then save them for after.
What troubles me is that if the Buddha has the divine eye, wouldn't he know that they don't know that? Why would he leave it there without a summary? And then later on explain, well, you could have asked me, wouldn't he known this already? What I'm trying to say is if he spoke to the disciples and he explained only the summary, not the exposition,
Yeah.
wouldn't he at the end know this already? What would he ask them? Well, you could have asked me. I would have tell you the same way, but you should have asked me. Well, would he just not explain it in the beginning? Like you explained before in the suttas, he's explained that he goes through it, or the Chinese sutta, he explains the exposition and summary.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be more correct to say that he goes, starts the sutta, and explains it without having to stop at the summary?
Is your point that with the
When you
divine
said
eye,
that-
the Buddha would have known that the disciples didn't understand?
Correct.
And so he should have stayed and given the explanation?
Correct.
I just don't know the answer.
Okay.
It seems that since he announced that I'm going to give a summary and exposition, he should have given the exposition. But why he departed without giving the exposition, it's a puzzle.
Right.
One could say that he could have foreseen that the monks would go to Maha Kaccana and ask him, and Maha Kaccana would give a good explanation. But in that case, he should have just not said, I'll teach you a summary and an exposition, but he should have just stated the summary without offering to give the exposition and then left. Or he could have given just a short statement and said, if you want to know the detailed meaning, go ask Maha Kaccana.
Correct, yeah.
So it's a puzzle. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
Excuse me? Somebody here had the question. Okay, then we'll end now, and we'll come back at 12:15, and we could have some discussion. Oh, and before we end, next week we won't be having a class because we have the Abhidharma retreat. I'm not sure whether there are any openings left. Earlier this week, Jishu told me that 6 people had registered for the Abhidharma retreat. And I thought, how is that possible? I thought, maybe I'll just cancel it if they're just 6. But then Sam had checked with Kaidi, and Kaidi said, oh, almost 70 people have registered. And then Jishu told me later, she said 60. She had said 60, but I heard 6. Okay, so next week there's the Abhidharma retreat. If you're interested to attend, you could inquire whether there are still any openings. Better rush. And then the next class will be the Saturday after that, when we'll do Sutta number 139. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the 5th, the 12th. The 19th will be the next class. No. The 12th I won't be here, yeah. Okay, so we now end with sharing the merits. Sharing the merits to the deities, Dhamma protecting devas, the nagas or dragon spirits, the bhutas, the fair spirits, and all beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu Sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya pavagupadaya vichetato etantare satakai upapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanino Dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we'll end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. It's good to erase